It's great to be here for such an occasion that is so important. What I want to say to students, if you were given a treasure with amazing value, incredible power, and infused with the force of centuries of struggle, would you just toss it aside? If I told you that men and women had fought and suffered and even died to possess just a small slice of this treasure's power, would you let it lay dormant or unused? That is your challenge. That is your treasure, the voice of your vote. Let's go back to the early days of American democracy and to the words of the Declaration of Independence, which said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Famous words indeed, perhaps the most famous in our history. But let's read on to the next segment, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed. Now, when our nation first started, let me illustrate what that means as we took a few timid first steps into a brave new world of self-government. All white men in this room that own land, please raise your hand. Okay? To everyone else, if you lived in those early days, you could not vote. So the people with their hands up represented the consent of the governed and what that meant then. Across the centuries, men fought and died in the Civil War for freedom and ultimately the right to vote. Jim Crow laws and poll taxes took that right away. Susan B. Anthony spearheaded a movement for women's voting rights in 1869, but it wasn't until 1920 that an amendment to the Constitution was ratified by enough states so that women nationwide could vote. In 1965, a century after the Civil War ended, men and women marched from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery to grasp the reins of their rights to vote, a right given them in theory, but denied them in reality. Across the South, men and women, blacks and whites, withstood clubs, fire hoses, and attack dogs, all trying to stand up for the right to vote. The right to vote cost Revolutionary War soldiers their lives on fields across the 13 colonies. It cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of men in the Civil War. In the Civil Rights Movement, it left many bruised, beaten, battered, and bloody. It cost Martin Luther King Jr. and many other leaders their lives, all to bequeath a right to you, a right you have to vote, a treasure. Look around the world. Look at people fighting and dying in Syria, and you'll see how much they value a right that you already have in your hands. Look at other nations where voters face threats and intimidation, yet still participate in their elections. It is a treasure. When you line up at your polling place on Election Day, your vote is no less valuable than the President of the United States, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In the eyes of the law, on voting day, we are all equal, with an equal say and an equal voice. So stand next to a multimillionaire or someone who has no money. There is no monetary value attached to your vote. In the voting booth, we find our most cherished founding belief that all men are created equal. To either grant or withdraw your consent comes only in the voting booth in America. If you choose to turn from that power, you relinquish your claim to the outcomes of government. If you don't think elections matter, think about all the hurdles that have been thrown up by the new Pennsylvania voter ID law, an idea favored by a legislature and a governor elected by the people of this state in 2010, the people who turned out. Consent of the governed. There are issues that will impact your life now and issues that will impact it decades from now. Healthcare, Social Security, tax policy, the war in Afghanistan, jobs, the economy, energy policy, foreign policy, and the fundamental philosophy of the role of government in our society. Many of you will graduate in the next year or two. When you go to grad school or get an internship under current law, you can go on your parents' health insurance. The outcome of this election may change that. Maybe you agree with that idea, maybe you don't. But if you don't vote, They will govern without your consent. Years from now, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security may be different, maybe not. You may think it is not important now, but years from now, you want to look back and wish you had voted. How should we react to Iran's attempt to attain nuclear weapons? There is a distinct choice in foreign policy goals of the candidates, and whichever way you fall on the issue, and I cast no judgment, whichever way you fall on that issue, you must vote. The winner of the election, again, will govern without your consent. Everyone focuses on the presidential election, and rightly so. But there are also issues in other races, and those elections matter too. There's a congressional race, a Senate race. We have a statewide attorney general's race that all Penn Staters should closely follow. We have learned the importance of that office in a very real way over the past year. In 2008, the nation looked at a map of Pennsylvania, and amid all the election results, there was Center County in the middle. It stood out from the surrounding counties in this respect: voter turnout. At the Hub, here in this building, where 11,000 students were registered to vote, 8,000 showed up. I know because I was here, and I know because I was inspired. For years, politicians could ignore voters and pay special attention to older voters. Why? Because the perception was that young people were apathetic and didn't vote. 4 years ago, that myth was shattered. The question now is, will you keep that up? The question is now, will you continue to keep the voter turnout at Penn State strong? If you look at some of the things that have happened for young people from this government since 2008, there's a definite focus on issues: student loans, Pell Grants, health care, education for people your age. The votes of college students across the country commanded respect and produced results. The results of the power to influence government policy by voting and voting in numbers. One of the great challenges in life is at the age of 18 or 20 or 22 to try and look at the decisions you make and the actions in your life now that will impact your life when you're 40 or 50 or 60. When you choose to vote, you will never regret taking a step to voice your consent or withdraw your consent from those who will govern you. Rest assured, the results of the past few elections have altered the course of this state and this country. Whether you like those results or not, only by voting can you impact the future course of this country. The election is less than 6 weeks away. It will be here before you know it. The deadline to register is less than 2 weeks away. That date is October 9th. There are people who can help you here and people that will be around campus over the next 2 weeks to help you register. Thomas Jefferson once said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Get educated on the issues that matter to you. Get registered. Think about your decision. And then show up and vote. It is a mighty gift passed down to you over the ages. A gift that is in your hands. Use it and get your friends to use it. Don't look back and say, I wish I had. Thank you very much.